All right. Good morning. Good morning. Come on, you guys. It's Monday morning. It's early. Good morning. Yeah. That was still pretty weak, I'm going to say. So thank you all for coming. It's good to see so many folks here, and I guess the rest of them will be kind of strolling in. We should be just short of 200 people or so today, so I'm very much looking forward to a fantastic conference next couple days, so thank you for joining us. I do want to take a moment to talk about a more somber issue, and that's the Campfire that happened just 200 miles north of here. I'm imagining most people in this room have heard about it. It is an insanely huge, destructive scenario. Over 14,000 houses burned to the ground. Over 80 people were killed in it, and they're still looking for hundreds more that hopefully they'll find just misplaced somewhere else. For people here in the Bay Area, I'm told that as far as south as San Jose, Santa Clara, you could actually smell the smoke. That's how massive this forest fire was and destructive. And the only reason I bring it up is I know this tech community is certainly pervasive in the Bay Area, and I know you're from all over the world, but I would ask if any of you are able, if you can go back one, sorry, to support some of the people that are displaced from this. A lot of the people that lived in a town ironically called Paradise, and it's called that because how beautiful it was in there. Many of them are from poorer socioeconomic strata, many retirees, etc. When their homes burn to the ground, they have nothing left. They literally escaped with the clothes on their back in many cases. Their cars are burned to the ground, everything they own. So if you are able and moved as such, please support them either through the North Valley Community Foundation or the Red Cross. Thank you. Moving back to our conference, you saw this when you walked in, the sponsors for this conference. So those of you who've been around long enough and are involved enough know that events like this aren't free. While we love Club Auto Sports, they don't give us this venue and feed us. We do that ourselves through funding. And the funding comes from a combination of the membership dues from the project and through the sponsors. So I'd like a quick round of applause for ARM, Intel, and Mellanox for helping sponsor this event. Thank you. And I'll talk later on a little bit about the budget and how we're able to afford this event and others. The governing board is made up of our gold member companies, 10 of them, plus one rep from the silver company. And I'd ask, I know there's some governing board reps in here today, if they could please stand and be recognized briefly. So we have Eras over here, we have James in the back. I can't see everybody here, Bob over here. So these are your governing board reps. Is George here? Not yet, but I have to believe George will be here shortly. I'm covering from Huawei, covering the silver board reps. So these are your governing board reps for the project. They're the ones who help organize events like this. There's a marketing subcommittee as well, and these are the people that help us decide where and how to spend the money and how to drive the project going forward. Is Tomas here somewhere as well? I think Tomas here, and I think Hermant is here. There's a couple other tech board reps here. So these are your tech board reps. One of them rotates and also sits on the governing board, and of course they manage the technical side of the project. So if you guys have any questions throughout the day for how the project is run from a technical side, a governing side, the budget, whatever, these are the guys to talk to. So please do reach out to us. Two other people I'd like to recognize that are fundamental in making this project go forward. Trishan is in the back, and is Jill here somewhere too? Where's Jill? Stand up. Got to make her stand up. So these two people, a round of applause for them, please. They're the ones that keep things moving forward. So Taman, the tech board, keep the technical side of the project going. Trishan and Jill keep the rest of it going, whether it's operational side or Jill's work in helping us drive the website and events and press releases and everything else. So fantastic. Thank you for all you do. It's tremendously appreciated by the entire project and the board. The other thing, of course, you see me say this at every conference we have, a request for recruitment for new members. How many people are from companies that are not currently members of the DBTK project? Show of hands. Okay, so that's not that many. So we're doing well, I guess, if everybody else is working for a company that is a member, so thank you for that. Those of you who did raise your hands, I'd ask you to think about trying to work within your companies about joining the DBTK project if you're involved in it, contributing to it, consuming it, using it, etc. The infrastructure and these events and everything else the project does is funded through community participation. and I'd ask you to help get involved either through project membership or perhaps sponsoring an event or some other thing. So again, please see myself, Trishan, or any other board members for that. And I will continue to ask for membership forever, because the growth of the project is fundamental, I think, to a project's long-term success. If you've been paying attention to the world news, there was a G20 event down in Argentina over the last few days, and while the economic side got a lot of the front news, there were sub-meetings on education and everything else. And I like to think of this as our DBDK 20 here as well. So it's a lot more fun and interesting from my perspective. This is a list of the top 20 contributing companies to our latest 1811 release, and those of you who might have read Tomas' the mailing list stats on 1820, you'll see these top 20 companies called out. You see a lot of them are not necessarily project members either, so if any of you are from these companies, again, I call out for these companies to support the project as well. But of course, I do appreciate the fact that they are contributing to the project through code contributions, commits, code reviews, etc. So it's great to see that happening across the world. Some stats on the project itself. So this looks back over the past 8 years from our earliest 1.5 release, which was probably, it must be 8 years ago or so now, maybe more, of how the project's grown over time. And any good business person loves to see curves that go from the bottom left and up and to the right, as they say. And in general, our trend absolutely is that. This release was the largest from the standpoint of the number of committers at 187. The number of patches, we fell a little bit short of the 1805 mega release that we had in May of earlier this year. But this one, I think, was actually very, very huge, and there were a lot of deletions and insertions as well that I haven't captured here, which you can see in Tomas' stats on the mailing list as well if you want to go take a look at that. The URL is at the very bottom of the screen here if anybody wants to go read that. The other thing that to me is fantastic is 73 new contributors. This is a stat that I think is, for me, great to see. Every time we have a release, you'll see a pretty significant number of new contributors. And that means that the project continues to grow. Not only do we have a large component of base contributors and reviewers that we have time and time again, but we continue to bring new blood and new people into the project. And that, to me, is a very, very healthy sign for the project. Are there any new contributors at 1811 was your very first submittals? Show of hands. Not one. There must be at least one in here. There's somebody's getting called out over here. Thank you. All right. So if you are the only one in the room, well done. Thank you. I'm guessing there probably are some others in here. But for all of you who did contribute to 1811, thank you. And thank you for working on the next 19.x releases as well to come. I talked about the over 20 companies that have contributed, so that's good to see. The other thing I'll add to it is that the .11 release every year is our long-term stable release. I know there are several folks who have raised their hand and stepped up to be maintainers of that. We commit from a community to maintain the stable release, I believe, for at least 2 years. And I will tell you and thank you that downstream from an adoption perspective, I regularly talk to equipment companies that are using it and service providers that are using it that have said they have moved their release cycle to be coincident with the long-term stable release because it helps them. So I think it's fantastic that the community stepped up a few years ago and created the LTS release, and now I think that's working quite well going forward. I want to touch on 3 things that are kind of new to the project. Some of you may know these, some of you may not. So earlier this year, Jill helped us work on the website for the project. And we kind of converted it from the old all-volunteer army that Tomas tried to orchestrate through a patch release process on improvement to building a website that was a little more visually friendly for people that were new to the project and going to dbdk.org to try to see, hey, what is this all about? While also maintaining the core DBDK element that the developers are used to. So you'll see a tab called DBDK Core. If you're a developer who's used to the old site where documentation, code, patches, discussions, the wiki all still exists there. If you're new to the project, you can go to the About tab or the News and Events tab, etc., and get more of a kind of marketing-centric face of the project there. So that turned out very well. The other thing from an events perspective, so in 2018, as we did in 2017, we held 4 events. We start the year off in India, we then go to China, we then went to our user space event in Dublin, and our last event for the year is here in San Jose, the DBDK North America or USA event. Next year, we will look to replicate those 4 events again, And the marketing subcommittee team is also exploring a few other things. The first thing they're exploring is the possibility of hosting an event in Japan. And they're also exploring the possibility of hosting an event on the East Coast of the U.S. to try to tap into that market up and down the East Coast, and also give people that are in Europe another opportunity to more readily come over instead of having to fly all the way to the West Coast. What I'd ask from all of you is some input on that. So if you think that's a great idea, if you have some suggestions, hey, on the East Coast, you might try to go to Boston, to Raleigh, to Charlotte. If someone has an opinion or thoughts on that, please grab somebody from the project and let them know. If you're interested in Japan and think that's a great idea, let us know that as well. I know we have some folks from NTT and others that are here speaking, I think, tomorrow. So please give us some feedback on that. And lastly, what they're also looking at is co-locating the events with other events. So this year we had our China event in Beijing. It was co-located with the Linux Foundation's LinuxCon, ContainerCon Cloud Open Conference. And for 2019, the marketing team is looking to see where else we might co-locate so that there's a larger audience who's interested in open source projects and networking that might tap into our event as well. So stay tuned on that front. And lastly, the community lab. And this is Jeremy Polsek, who's in the audience. Jeremy, where are you hiding? In the back here. He has the second to last slide at the end of the day today. Will give us an update on the lab. I'm very excited about the progress we've been making there, so look forward to hearing about that as well. A quick view on financials. So for those of you who are members of the project, this is where your money is being spent. So the bottom left on this slide shows the money we have coming in, largely membership, sponsorship, and a small amount of money from registration fees to help fund events directly like this. And you will notice if you attend other projects, other summits, the registration fee from this is pretty nominal. It's largely to get you to commit to actually showing up once you put your name down saying, hey, I'm coming. Because when it's free, what we find is we get 300 to 500 people that sign up and then about 200 show up. And that's kind of a disaster to manage from a space size and a food allocation perspective. So that's where the money comes in from. When we started the project a year and a half ago, the two key things that people wanted to bring the project into the LF were to be able to pool funds to support events and infrastructure. And that's where the vast majority of our money continues to go. The events, of course, are the ones I talked about, the 4 across the globe, plus some more we'll do next year. The infrastructure is, of course, the current infrastructure we've had, plus the work in the University of New Hampshire Community Lab. So you'll hear more about that later on. The balance of the budget goes for more of the traditional overhead. So it's the legal resources from the Linux Foundation that we've used when issues come up around licensing, and we've had a few of those already. General administration overhead at Linux Foundation and their back-end infrastructure to manage some things for us. And then, of course, some of the staffing and travel and other expenses that go alongside with running the project itself. So again, if anyone has any questions on this, I'm happy to address those later on. Catch myself or any of the board members offline, happy to walk through where the project's going. And if anyone has suggestions, we're always open and looking for those as well. The next 2 pages are just a snapshot of the agenda, and I'm not going to read through those, but if you look at the back of your badge, you'll see a link to this sketch.com tool, and on there, if you go online either through the app or on your browser, you'll be able to see the entire agenda for today. You can double-click on any one of them and see who the speaker is and what their abstract was and get to know a little bit more about them. Breaks in the morning and afternoon. Restrooms are somewhere to the back. Food is obviously right here. We are going to have a networking reception this evening, so please stick around for that. Thomas will be running a panel session at the very end of the day with some of the Lightning Talk afternoon speakers, so that will be a lot of interactivity. We have speakers today from semiconductor companies, equipment companies, ISVs, comm service providers, cloud service providers, and cable service providers. So should be a fantastic couple of days. Looking forward to here. Let's see, last thing, just general guidance for this conference. You know, this is our opportunity to get to meet the community face to face. We're used to seeing all the names on the mailing list. You're used to being in discussions with people, either online or during some of the community calls, but this is your chance to meet people directly. So please take the time to do that. If you need to know, hey, who is this person? Ask somebody else. I guarantee you within 1 or 2 questions, we will find that person for you, and you can put a face to the email address. Have some fun, ask some questions. I think we're going to have rotating mics. Is that right, Trishan, for Q&A? Okay. So after different talks, if you have a question, please raise your hand, and we'll get you a microphone so you can ask. It's fundamental to do that. And last thing, have some fun. So just like the slide says, you guys ready here? Repeat after me. DBDK is valuable. DBDK is valuable. What we do is interesting and important. All right, that was pretty weak, but it is early in the morning. All right, with that, I'm just about out of time. I thank Zhao Wang. Where are you hiding? Zhao Wang is our first presenter, so I'm going to hand it off to him, and I thank you all very much.